Chef Boubacar slammed the clay pot onto the stainless steel counter. "This is it," he shouted to his empty restaurant kitchen in Dakar. "This is how I'm going to change everything." His hands trembled as he lifted the lid. The aroma hit him immediately. Fermented cabbage mixed with hibiscus and tamarind. His grandmother's West African spices dancing with Korean tradition. It was madness. It was beautiful. It was going to either make him famous or destroy his reputation. 3 months earlier, Boubacar had been sitting in his tiny apartment watching Korean cooking shows when his phone buzzed. "Boubacar, are you seeing this?" His sister Fatou's voice cracked through the speaker. "They're having a kimchi competition in Seoul. International chefs. Prize money is 20 million won." 20 million? Boubacar jumped up, nearly knocking over his laptop. "That's almost $15,000. You have to enter." Fatou insisted. "You've been obsessed with Korean food for 2 years now." "But Fatou, I'm Senegalese. What do I know about making real kimchi?" "Everything," she fired back. "You've made it 100 times. You literally dream about fermentation." She wasn't wrong. Boubacar had fallen in love with Korean cuisine after a Korean tourist visited his restaurant and requested something spicy. He'd improvised a dish using the gochugaru he'd ordered online, and the tourist had cried. Actual tears. "This reminds me of home," the woman had said, gripping his hand. "But it tastes like something new. Something incredible." That moment changed everything. Now, staring at the competition website, Boubacar felt his heart racing. The application deadline was in 3 days. The competition was in 2 months. He had no formal training in Korean cooking. No Korean grandmother teaching him secrets. No credibility. He clicked submit anyway. 6 weeks later, Boubacar stepped off the plane at Incheon International Airport with 2 suitcases and a dream that felt increasingly insane. "Welcome to Korea." The competition coordinator, a sharp woman named Ms. Choi, greeted him with a bow. "You must be Chef Boubacar from Senegal." "Yes, thank you for having me." Boubacar bowed back, probably too deeply, possibly in the wrong direction. "I must admit," Ms. Choi said as they walked toward baggage claim, "when we received your application, there was some discussion. We've never had an African chef compete in our kimchi competition before." Boubacar's stomach dropped. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all." She smiled, but something in her eyes suggested otherwise. "We're very interested to see your interpretation." Very interested indeed. The competition housing was a traditional hanok in Bukshin village. Beautiful, historic, and filled with 12 other chefs, who looked at Boubacar like he'd accidentally wandered into the wrong building. "You're competing?" a Japanese chef named Hiroshi asked, not bothering to hide his surprise. "In the kimchi competition?" "That's right." Boubacar extended his hand. "Chef Boubacar Diop. Nice to meet you." Hiroshi shook it limply. "Interesting. Very interesting." That word again. Interesting. It was starting to feel like code for something else. A tall Korean chef with silver-rimmed glasses approached next. His name tag read Chef Dae-hyun. He looked Boubacar up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "So you make kimchi in Senegal?" Chef Dae-hyun asked, his tone dripping with doubt. "I make many things," Boubacar replied, keeping his voice friendly. "Korean food is one of my passions." "Passion is nice." Chef Dae-hyun smirked. "But kimchi requires generations of knowledge. It's in our blood. You can't just learn it from YouTube videos." Several other chefs chuckled. Boubacar felt his face burning, but forced himself to smile. "You're absolutely right," he said calmly. "Traditional knowledge is invaluable. That's why I'm here. To learn and to share what I know too." Chef Dae-hyun snorted and walked away. That night, Boubacar couldn't sleep. He pulled out his phone and called his mother in Dakar. "Mama, I think I made a mistake." "What happened?" Her voice was immediate concern. "Are you hurt?" No, I'm fine. But Mama, nobody thinks I belong here. I'm the only African chef. The only one. Everyone keeps saying my participation is interesting, like I'm some kind of circus act." His mother was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke with that steel in her voice he knew so well. "Boubacar Amadou Diop. Did I raise a coward? No, mama. Did I raise someone who runs away when people doubt him? No, mama. Then why are you calling me with complaints instead of solutions? You have our ancestors' recipes in your hands. You have knowledge those Korean chefs don't have. You have Africa in your soul. Now stop crying and start cooking. The line went dead. His mother had hung up on him. Boubacar laughed despite himself. She was right. She was always right. He thought about his grandmother, who had taught him everything about fermentation. She'd made fermented fish, fermented millet, fermented vegetables. She understood transformation at a cellular level, even if she'd never heard those scientific words. Boubacar, she used to say, fermentation is magic. You take something that would rot and turn it into treasure. That's what our ancestors discovered. That's what keeps us alive. He fell asleep, remembering her hands working dough, her voice singing old Wolof songs. The next morning, competition prep began. Each chef received identical ingredients: napa cabbage, Korean radish, gochugaru, garlic, ginger, fish sauce, and salted shrimp. They had 1 week to prepare their kimchi before the judging. You may use the communal kitchen, Miss Choi announced, but your recipes and techniques must remain private. Any chef caught stealing secrets will be immediately disqualified. Boubacar set up his station in the corner. He'd brought special ingredients from Senegal in his luggage: dried hibiscus flowers, tamarind paste, Negro pepper, Saline pepper, things that would make his grandmother proud. What is that? Chef Dae-hyun walked over, pointing at Boubacar's ingredients with obvious disgust. That's not kimchi ingredients. It is for my kimchi, Boubacar replied cheerfully. I'm doing fusion. Chef Dae-hyun's face went through several expressions at once: shock, horror, disgust, anger. Fusion? With kimchi? That's interesting. Boubacar offered with a grin. That's sacrilege. Chef Dae-hyun shouted. Kimchi is sacred. You can't just throw random African spices into it and call it kimchi. This is our culture, our heritage. Other chefs stopped working to watch the confrontation. I'm not disrespecting anything. Boubacar kept his voice calm. I'm honoring both cultures. Korean fermentation techniques meet West African spice traditions. Both have thousands of years of history. You're making a mockery of this competition. Chef Dae-hyun's voice rose higher. You have no business being here. That's enough. A voice cut through the tension. A young female chef approached. Her name tag read Chef Eun-ji. She looked at Chef Dae-hyun with disapproval. Leave him alone, Dae-hyun, she said firmly. He has every right to be here. The competition is open to international chefs. That's the whole point. But Eun-ji, he's putting hibiscus in kimchi. Hibiscus. So what? Eun-ji crossed her arms. My grandmother puts persimmons in her kimchi. My aunt uses pine nuts. Kimchi has always evolved. Why are you so threatened by someone trying something new? Chef Dae-hyun's face turned red. He muttered something in Korean and stormed off. Eun-ji turned to Boubacar with an apologetic smile. Sorry about him. He's very traditional. Actually, he's more traditional than tradition itself. Boubacar laughed, feeling tension drain from his shoulders. Thank you for standing up for me. Don't thank me yet. Eun-ji grinned. I still plan to beat you, but I want to beat you fairly. Deal. Boubacar extended his hand and they shook. Can I ask you something? Eun-ji leaned in, curious. What made you want to compete in a kimchi competition? Of all the cooking competitions in the world. Boubacar thought about it. In Senegal, we have this dish called yassa. It uses fermented onions and lemon. The fermentation process is very similar to kimchi. When I first learned about kimchi, I thought, we do this too. Not exactly the same, but the principle? The understanding that fermentation creates depth and complexity? That's universal. Eun-ji's eyes lit up. That's fascinating. I never thought about fermentation as a universal language. It is. Boubacar's enthusiasm grew. Every culture that preserved food before refrigeration developed fermentation. Korea has kimchi. Japan has natto and tsukmano. Europe has sauerkraut and cheese. Africa has so many fermented foods. We're all doing the same magic with different ingredients. Drop a like if you agree that food should have no borders. They talked for another 20 minutes before Ms. Choi reminded everyone to return to work. Boubacar felt renewed energy. He wasn't alone anymore. At least one person understood what he was trying to do. Day 3 of preparation. Boubacar was massaging his cabbage with salt, singing a Wolof song his grandmother taught him, when Chef Daehyun appeared again. But this time, his expression was different. Less hostile, more curious. "You're singing while you work?" Chef Daehyun asked, though his tone was softer than before. "Of course. My grandmother always said food can feel your emotions. If you're angry while cooking, the food tastes angry. If you're happy, the food tastes happy." Chef Daehyun's expression changed completely. Something vulnerable crossed his face. "My grandmother said the exact same thing. She said kimchi making is like prayer. You have to have the right heart." "Exactly." Boubacar beamed. "In Senegal, we say cooking is conversation with the ancestors." For the first time, Chef Daehyun smiled. A real smile. "My grandmother used to sing too. Old songs from her village. She said the songs helped the fermentation." "Yes." Boubacar nodded enthusiastically. "Sound creates vibrations. Vibrations affect everything, even microorganisms. Science is only now proving what our grandmothers always knew." They stood in silence for a moment, connected by memories of wise women who understood food's deepest secrets. "I'm sorry," Chef Daehyun said quietly, "for what I said before. I was scared." "Scared?" Boubacar was surprised. "Of what?" "That you might actually be brilliant." Chef Daehyun laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "That your fusion might work better than my traditional recipe. That I've been so focused on doing things exactly as they've always been done that I've stopped innovating." "Your traditional recipe is valuable," Boubacar insisted. "We need people like you to preserve authentic techniques. I'm not trying to replace tradition. I'm trying to build bridges." Chef Daehyun nodded slowly. "Maybe you're not so crazy after all. Maybe just a little bit crazy." They both laughed. Day 5. The kimchi was fermenting. Boubacar checked his pots obsessively every hour. The smell was developing perfectly. The hibiscus added a subtle floral note that made his heart sing. The tamarind brought unexpected tanginess that complemented the fermentation. The Negro pepper provided heat that was different from gochujang, but somehow enhanced it rather than competing with it. "It's working," he whispered to himself, hands pressed against the cool clay pot. "It's actually working." Unji stopped by his station. "How's it going?" "I think it's good," Boubacar said nervously. "But I won't know until the judges taste it." "Can I smell it?" Unji asked. Boubacar hesitated, then lifted the lid slightly. Unji leaned in and inhaled deeply. Her eyes widened. "Oh wow, that's completely different. It's familiar, but also totally new. There's something floral and something tangy that's not just the normal kimchi tang." "Hibiscus and tamarind," Boubacar explained. "It's beautiful." Unji said sincerely, "I mean it. Whatever happens in this competition, you've created something special." But doubt still crept in at night. What if the judges hated it? What if they found his fusion offensive? What if he'd flown 8,000 miles just to embarrass himself, his restaurant, and his entire country? He called Fatou. "Stop overthinking," his sister commanded. "You've already won. You've already proven that a Senegalese chef can stand alongside the best Korean chefs in the world. The rest is just details." "Just details." Boubacar laughed. "Fatou, the entire point is the competition." "No." Fatou's voice was fierce. "The point is that you dared. That's the real victory. Everything else is a bonus." Day 7. Judgment Day. The competition venue was packed. Food critics, journalists, Korean celebrities, even a TV crew. Boubacar's hands shook as he carried his kimchi pots to his station. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ms. Choi's voice boomed through the microphone. "Welcome to the 15th Annual International Kimchi Competition. Today, 13 chefs from around the world will present their interpretation of Korea's most beloved dish. The crowd applauded. Camera flashes were everywhere. Our judges today include Master Kim Jong-guk, Korea's most celebrated kimchi master, Chef Sarah Chun, Michelin-starred Korean fusion chef from New York, and Professor Lee Sang-ho, food historian and author of The Kimchi Story. Boubacar's heart hammered against his ribs like it wanted to escape his chest. This was it. Everything he'd worked for. Everything he'd dreamed about. Everything he'd risked. Chef Hiroshi from Japan, please present your kimchi, Ms. Choi announced. Boubacar watched as Hiroshi confidently placed his kimchi before the judges. Perfect red color. Traditional presentation. The judges nodded approvingly. Excellent technique. Master Kim declared. Very respectful to Korean tradition. One by one, chefs presented. Each kimchi looked more traditional than the last. Each received polite nods and compliments. Boubacar's anxiety grew with every presentation. A Chinese chef presented kimchi with Sichuan peppercorns. The judges looked intrigued, but ultimately said it was too spicy, overshadowing the fermentation. A Thai chef added lemongrass. Interesting, Professor Lee Sang-ho said, but lemongrass fights with the garlic rather than complementing it. An American chef tried adding maple syrup for sweetness. Master Kim actually frowned. Kimchi should not be dessert. Then came Chef Dae-hyun. This is my grandmother's recipe, Chef Dae-hyun said with pride, his voice trembling slightly. Passed down 4 generations. Made exactly as she taught me. Every measurement precise. Every technique honored. The judges tasted carefully. Professor Lee closed his eyes, clearly transported somewhere. This is nostalgia in a jar. This is childhood. This is sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, watching her hands work magic. This is home. Chef Sarah Chun nodded enthusiastically. The balance is impeccable. The fermentation depth is extraordinary. This is what happens when technique is perfected over generations. Master Kim smiled warmly at Chef Dae-hyun. Your grandmother would be very proud. This is museum-quality kimchi. Perfect preservation of tradition. The crowd murmured appreciation. Chef Dae-hyun bowed deeply, tears in his eyes. Boubacar felt his stomach sink. How could he compete with that? With generations of knowledge? With perfection itself? Eun-ji went next. Her kimchi was beautiful. Traditional foundation, but with modern innovation. She'd added Asian pear for sweetness and pine nuts for texture. Innovative yet respectful. Chef Sarah Chun smiled broadly. This is how tradition evolves naturally. You've taken what your ancestors gave you and added your own voice. This is the future of kimchi. Master Kim tasted 3 times. The pine nuts are genius. They add richness without overwhelming. And the pear? It creates a bridge between the spice and the fermentation. Well done. Eun-ji caught Boubacar's eye as she returned to her station. She gave him a thumbs up and mouthed, "You've got this." But did he? 3 more chefs presented. Good kimchis. Solid kimchis. Safe kimchis. But nothing extraordinary. Nothing that made the judges lean forward with excitement. Then Ms. Choi called the name Boubacar had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Chef Boubacar Diop from Senegal. The room went absolutely silent. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Cameras turned toward him. Someone in the audience actually gasped. Boubacar's legs felt like water as he stood. He picked up his clay pot, hands shaking so badly he thought he might drop it. Each step toward the judges' table felt like walking through honey. He placed the pot before the judges and removed the lid with trembling fingers. The aroma hit immediately. Master Kim's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. Chef Sarah leaned forward, nostrils flaring. Professor Lee looked genuinely confused, tilting his head like a curious bird. "What is this smell?" Master Kim demanded, not unkindly, just profoundly shocked. "This is not traditional kimchi smell. This is something completely different." "No, sir, it's not traditional." Boubacar's voice cracked like a teenager. He cleared his throat and tried again. This is Senegalese Korean fusion kimchi. I've used traditional Korean techniques and base ingredients, but I've added hibiscus flowers from Senegal, tamarind paste for depth, and West African peppers, including Negro pepper and Saline pepper. The silence was so complete Boubacar could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. You did what? Master Kim's face was completely unreadable. Was that anger? Curiosity? Horror? I know it sounds crazy. Boubacar rushed on, words tumbling out faster and faster. But in Senegal, we have dishes like yassa, with fermented onions. We have netetu, fermented locust beans. We understand fermentation deeply. It's in our culture just like yours. I wanted to show that Korean and African food cultures aren't separate worlds. They're both parts of the same human story about preservation, transformation, and flavor. Comment below. What do you think happened next? Did the judges spit it out or love it? Master Kim picked up his chopsticks. Slowly. So slowly, it felt like time had stopped. He lifted a piece of cabbage, examined it under the bright competition lights, smelled it carefully, his nose nearly touching the kimchi. The entire room held its breath. Somewhere in the back, someone's phone camera clicked. It sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Master Kim put the kimchi in his mouth. Boubacar watched his face like his life depended on it. Because in a way it did. His restaurant's future, his credibility, his dream. Everything rested on this moment. Master Kim chewed. Once. Twice. His expression changed. Surprise. Confusion. His eyes widened slightly. Then something else. Something Boubacar couldn't read at all. He chewed more. Reached for another piece. Then another. He was taking more bites. This is... Master Kim started. He stopped. Closed his eyes. Tasted again. This is the most unusual kimchi I have ever tasted in 50 years of making kimchi. Boubacar's heart sank to his feet. Unusual meant bad. It had to mean bad. He'd failed. He'd humiliated himself in front of everyone. And it is extraordinary. Master Kim continued, his voice rising with genuine excitement. The hibiscus adds floral notes that don't just sit on top. They integrate. They brighten the garlic without masking it. The tamarind provides acidity that enhances the natural fermentation acids rather than competing. These African peppers, they have a completely different heat profile than gochugaru. Different compounds, different burn. But somehow they work. They work beautifully together. The room exploded with noise. People were shouting. Cameras were flashing like lightning. Chef Sarah grabbed her chopsticks and practically lunged for the kimchi. She took a large piece, chewed, and her eyes went absolutely huge. Oh my God! This is incredible. This is what fusion should always be, but almost never is. This isn't confused. This isn't trying to be Korean or trying to be African. This is a genuine conversation between two culinary traditions. Every element has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is gimmicky. She took another bite immediately. The hibiscus. It's doing what I've never seen before. It's adding this subtle floral dimension that opens up the whole flavor profile. And the tamarind? Genius. Pure genius. It adds this depth of tang that makes the fermentation taste more complex without changing its fundamental nature. Professor Lee was the last to taste. He took his time, which made Boubacar even more nervous. The historian chewed thoughtfully, his face serious. Then he took another piece. And another. Finally, he spoke quietly, but everyone strained to hear every word. Food historians like myself, we sometimes get trapped in the idea that authentic means unchanged. We become guardians of a past that never actually existed because we forget that food has always traveled, always evolved, always adapted. His voice grew stronger. People think kimchi is ancient and unchanging. But Chinese cabbage wasn't even used in Korea until the 18th century. Gochugaru, the very soul of modern kimchi, came from the Americas through Portuguese traders. What we call traditional is actually the result of centuries of fusion. He pointed at Boubacar's kimchi with his chopsticks. What Chef Boubacar has done is not disrespectful. It's not cultural appropriation. It's the continuation of kimchi's natural evolution. He's added the next chapter to a story that's been written across continents and centuries. This is living food history. Tears streamed down Boubacar's face. He didn't even try to hide them. His vision blurred, but he could see people standing, applauding. Chef Daehyun was clapping. Even Hiroshi was nodding with respect. Master Kim stood up, which made everyone go quiet again. In 50 years of judging kimchi competitions, I have never given a perfect score. The closest I came was 15 years ago when I gave a 98. Today, I give my first 100. The crowd went absolutely insane. People were jumping, screaming. Someone started a chant in Korean that Boubacar didn't understand, but felt in his bones. But the competition wasn't over. 5 more chefs still had to present. Boubacar returned to his station on legs that barely worked, his whole body shaking with adrenaline and disbelief. Eun-ji grabbed his arm as he passed, her grip so tight it almost hurt. You did it. You actually did it. I knew you would. I knew it. Chef Daehyun approached him, and Boubacar tensed, expecting more hostility. But instead, Chef Daehyun bowed deeply. I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. You didn't disrespect kimchi. You honored it by taking it seriously enough to make it your own. Please forgive my rudeness. There's nothing to forgive. Boubacar said, still crying. You pushed me to be better. Your skepticism made me work harder. They hugged, and the crowd applauded again. The remaining presentations felt like a blur. Good kimchis. Traditional kimchis. Safe kimchis. But after Boubacar's presentation, the energy had fundamentally shifted. The judges kept comparing everything to the African fusion they'd just experienced. One chef's perfectly good traditional kimchi was dismissed as technically perfect but uninspired. Another's attempt at innovation was called trying too hard to be different. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ms. Choi returned to the microphone. Judges, have you made your decision? The 3 judges huddled together. They whispered intensely. Master Kim seemed to be arguing something passionately, gesturing with his hands. Chef Sarah was nodding vigorously. Professor Lee was taking notes, writing furiously in a small notebook. 5 minutes felt like 5 years. We have decided, Master Kim announced. 3rd place goes to Chef Eun-ji for her innovative use of Asian pear and pine nuts while maintaining traditional technique and respect for kimchi's fundamental character. Applause filled the room. Eun-ji bowed gracefully, grinning so wide her face must have hurt. 2nd place goes to Chef Daehyun for his perfect execution of traditional family recipe kimchi. His technical skill is flawless, and his preservation of generational knowledge is invaluable to Korean culinary heritage. More applause. Chef Daehyun bowed deeply, pressing his hands to his face, clearly emotional. And 1st place. Master Kim paused, letting the tension build. The room went silent again. 1st place goes to Chef Boubacar Diop from Senegal for showing us that kimchi has no borders, for reminding us that food is a living, breathing, evolving conversation between cultures, for having the courage to bring his own heritage to our beloved dish and creating something nobody has ever tasted before, for proving that respect and innovation are not enemies but partners. The room didn't just erupt. It exploded. People were standing on chairs, cheering, crying. Camera flashes were everywhere like a fireworks display. Boubacar couldn't move. His entire body had stopped working. His brain couldn't process what was happening. Eun-ji and Chef Daehyun both pushed him forward. Go. Go accept your award, they shouted over the noise. He stumbled to the stage like a drunk man. Ms. Choi handed him a trophy that was heavier than he expected and an oversized check that read 20 million won in huge numbers. 20 million won. He'd actually won. This was real. Master Kim bowed to him. A master with 50 years of experience, a living legend, was bowing to him. You have taught this old man something today, Master Kim said, gripping Boubacar's shoulders with surprising strength. You have reminded me why I fell in love with food in the first place. Not because it stays the same, but because it changes. Because it connects us. Thank you. No, thank you. Boubacar managed to choke out through his tears. Thank you for having an open mind. Thank you for tasting with your heart and not just your training. The press conference afterwards was absolute chaos. Chef Boubacar. What inspired this fusion? Chef Boubacar. Will you open a restaurant in Korea? Chef Boubacar. What does this win mean for African cuisine? Chef Boubacar. Can you teach us how to make this kimchi? He answered as best he could, still in shock, still unable to believe this was his life now. Then a reporter asked the question that changed everything again. Chef Boubacar, what will you do with the prize money? He hadn't even thought about it. The money had never been the point. But now, standing there with all those cameras on him and the weight of victory on his shoulders, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. I'm going to use this money to start a culinary exchange program. The words came out clear and strong, surprising even himself. Between Senegal and Korea, bringing Korean chefs to West Africa and African chefs to Korea. We have so much to learn from each other. Today proved that food can build bridges between any two places if we're brave enough to try. The room went silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then everyone. Soon everyone was applauding again, somehow even louder than before. Hit that like button if you think this is what the food world needs more of. That evening, after all the ceremonies and interviews and celebrations and photographs, Boubacar sat alone in the Hannock garden under the stars, finally able to call home. Mama, I won. I actually won. His mother's scream nearly shattered his phone speaker. I knew it. I knew you would. Your grandmother is watching from heaven and she's dancing. She's so proud she's probably bothering all the other ancestors. Boubacar laughed through his tears. I wish she could have tasted it, Mama. I wish she could have seen their faces. She did, my son. She did. She was in every stir you made, every spice you added. That's how our ancestors work. They don't leave us. They cook through us. Their hands guide ours. Their wisdom speaks through our instincts. After hanging up, Boubacar sat in the quiet garden, holding his trophy, and let himself finally feel everything. Joy, relief, gratitude, exhaustion, pride. Beautiful night, isn't it? Chef Daehyun's voice came from behind him. Chef Daehyun, you scared me. Chef Daehyun sat down beside him on the wooden bench. I owe you a real apology, not just for today, but for my entire attitude. When you first arrived, I didn't think you belonged here. I thought kimchi competition should only be for people who grew up eating kimchi, breathing kimchi, living kimchi. And now I realize I was being an idiot. Chef Daehyun laughed, but it was a genuine laugh, not bitter. You showed me that belonging isn't about where you're from or who your grandmother was. It's about how much you care. You cared enough to study, to experiment, to risk failure, to travel 8,000 miles to compete against people who had every advantage you didn't have. That's what makes a real chef. Not bloodline, not geography, courage and passion. Thank you. Boubacar said quietly, meaning it with his whole heart. That means everything coming from you. They sat in comfortable silence, two chefs from opposite sides of the world, connected by fermented cabbage and the universal language of food. 3 months later, Boubacar's restaurant in Dakar had a line around the block every single night. His Senegalese Korean fusion menu was an international sensation. Food critics from Paris, New York, and Tokyo were flying to Senegal just to taste his kimchi. He'd hired 2 Korean chefs through his new exchange program, and they were teaching his staff traditional techniques while learning about West African cooking. Master Kim had even visited, spending 2 weeks in Senegal, learning about West African fermentation techniques, tasting everything, taking notes constantly. Your grandmother would have loved my grandmother, Master Kim had declared while tasting Senegalese fermented fish for the first time. They speak the same language, the language of transformation, the language of patience, the language of turning time itself into flavor. And the kimchi that started it all? Boubacar made it every single day. He served it alongside thigh and yassa and maif and every other Senegalese dish on his menu. Tourists came from all over the world specifically to taste the kimchi that shocked Korea. He'd had to hire 3 additional staff members just to keep up with kimchi production. But Boubacar never forgot the real lesson he'd learned. Food isn't about borders. It's about bridges. It's about having the courage to say what if and the humility to honor where you came from while exploring where you're going. It's about respecting tradition enough to add to it rather than just repeating it. If this story inspired you, drop a comment telling us about a time you tried something everyone said was impossible. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible food stories that prove passion and courage can change everything. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another inspiring culinary journey.